Hey there. Thanks again for listening to my YouTube channel, Jacob's Bible. We're going through Job right now, and I'm sure you're all familiar with the story of Job. But we're in chapter 17, where Job is crying out in his anguish once again, after he has had to listen to three of his so-called friends give him their 2 cents and their wisdom, which was no wisdom at all. And in chapter 16, verse 1, Job says, I have heard many things like these. Miserable comforters are you all. That's what Job's comment was to each of his three friends' comments to him. So yeah, Job is going onward about his situation and crying out from a tormented, scabbed, wormed body. And after his family's been killed and servants killed and livestock stolen, he's been ravaged on all sides. And so he's still crying out. We've yet to hear from God later in this book. We will, but we're just getting through the dialogue between Job and his friends. In chapter 17, verse 1, Job continues on. He says, "My spirit is broken. My days are cut short. The grave awaits me." Notice the three things he mentions in that very first verse: his spirit, the days he has left, and the grave. He's telling us exactly where he's at in his inner man, what's going on inside his body and his mind and his spirit. And notice when he's going through suffering, he's talking about the grave a lot. He's talking about days. He's talking about how he doesn't want to live anymore. He's despairing of life. He wishes he wasn't born. And that's how miserable suffering can be and can get. Most likely you've been through or had a taste of that in your life. And if you have, it's true. You begin to count your days. You begin to wonder if you're going to live and survive, or if it's even worth it, or if you want to. And you begin to take notice of your life and how short it is. So just some thoughts there about verse 1. Verse 2, he says, "Surely mockers surround me. My eyes must dwell on their hostility. Give me, O God, the pledge you demand. Who else will put up security for me? You have closed their minds to understanding, therefore you will not let them triumph. If a man denounces his friends for reward, the eyes of his children will fail. God has made me a byword to everyone, a man in whose face people spit. My eyes have grown dim with grief. My whole frame is but a shadow. Upright men are appalled at this, and the innocent are aroused against the ungodly. Nevertheless, the righteous will hold to their ways, and those with clean hands will grow stronger. But come on, all of you, try again. I will not find a wise man among you. My days have passed, my plans are shattered, and so are the desires of my heart." God has put Job in a crash course of pain and suffering and trials and hurt, and his entire life, the trajectory of it has been halted abruptly, and he doesn't know the trajectory of his life going forward, and his desires of his heart were probably alive and thriving in his life at one point, but no longer they are there in his life. They're gone. He's troubled by the men that are and the people that are surrounding him. He's clearly been spit on. He's been given horrible thoughts and horrible advice, and basically been condemned by the so-called righteous people around him. And they probably are godly, righteous people, but they're getting it wrong because they have no understanding of what's really going on in Job's life. And I think that's common in our lives as well. I know I've seen people make really off judgments about situations even though they're Christians and they've made judgments on things and assessments on things, but yet they didn't have all the facts, and so their judgments were in error. Verse 12, going forward. These men turn night into day. In the face of darkness, they say, light is near. If the only home I hope for is the grave, if I spread out my bed in darkness, if I say to corruption, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who can see any hope for me? Will it go down to the gates of death? Will we descend together into the dust? Job's focus here is continually on the grave in multiple thoughts, in multiple chapters, and he continually talks about the grave and what it might be like. And I think it's just the human response to suffering. We begin to think about those things and get despairing, and that's kind of where Job is at this time. But chapter 18, we get Bildad. So we get more from Bildad, one of the three friends that Job has. And pity Job, not just for his suffering and what he's going through, but also for the friendships that he has around him. He has three friends, and they thought that they were tight with Job, so they assumed that they had what Job needed, and clearly that's not. But we're going to hear more back from Bildad in chapter 18.